In this video, we will be installing an Exotic Marine Systems baffle kit. We recommend watching the video all the way through before beginning. This will give you a better understanding of the complete process, helping to avoid any mistakes that will require added time and frustration to your installation. We offer kits in many different sizes. However, the installation is basically the same from model to model. For this video, we will be installing a 20 long kit in an Aqueon brand tank, just like the ones available during the Petco $1 per gallon sale. The baffle should fit inside the tank with some slack, the reason being that acrylic absorbs small amounts of water and will expand ever so slightly. If the baffle is tight-fitting, the baffle won't have any room to expand and could crack the glass panels. When there is a little space, the silicone will absorb this tiny bit of expansion. There are a few guidelines we feel you should take into consideration when laying out your sump. The small chamber where the water enters the sump should be 2.5 to 4 inches, depending on your flow and drain pipe diameter. You can make it smaller to just fit the diameter of the plumbing, but when it's a little wider, it allows the water on the surface to be less turbulent and create a smoother flow of water into the next chamber. We feel it is worth a little extra space to give a quieter sump. Make sure that you have a chamber large enough to house your heaters. Some models tend to be quite long, and if you only account for the size of your skimmer, you may build the chamber too small to fit the heaters. The return pump section is the only portion of the entire system that moves up or down based on evaporation. So the larger the section, the longer you can go without adding top-off water. The smaller the section, the quicker the water level will drop. Once you have the layout of your sump complete and your equipment dry fitted, you can begin to mark up your tank for the different baffle positions. Starting with the first baffle, mark between 3 and 3.5 inches from the inside of the side panel. Using a straight edge, draw lines around the tank. Make sure that the inside of the tank is clean and free of any dust or residue that could keep the silicone from adhering to the tank. Run a generous bead of silicone down the line along the front, bottom, and back of the tank. Next, bring the panel in from the left side of the silicone. Push the panel into the silicone so that it is only touching the right-hand side of the panel. You want the left side of the panel to remain silicone-free at this point. Using the supplied right angles, place them along the bottom and sides of the tank to ensure the panel is perfectly vertical and perpendicular to the front and rear panels. Using a finger or caulking tool, smooth out the silicone around the edge of the panel, then readjust the panel using the jigs to double check that it is still straight. Allow the panel to set in place and the silicone to cure at least 10 hours. Because the next step requires you to apply pressure to the baffle, you want the baffle to be firmly cured in place before proceeding. Don't rush this step. We include vertical braces that should be siliconed on the front and back panels of the tank. These braces give a lot of surface area to ensure a very strong adhesion. To install the braces, run a bead of silicone along the brace and push it up against the glass in the panel. Apply firm pressure and work the brace back and forth while squeezing out any air pockets. Make sure the silicone squeezes out along all 4 sides and that it's pressed up firmly against the baffle. Immediately after the braces are installed, run a bead of silicone all around the baffle and smooth it all out. Before the silicone has a chance to cure, install horizontal braces and the sock holder into its tabs and push the back panel on. Make sure that the rings on the sock holder are facing down. These rings allow the socks to fit flush inside the holder, making a smoother flow of water, cutting down on noise and salt spray. With the back panel firmly against the brace and the top holder, run a bead of silicone around the outside of the panel and smooth it out. The panel should stay in place on its own, but a few pieces of blue masking tape will ensure that the panel does not move while the silicone cures. Let it cure several hours until the silicone is firm to the touch. Next, run a bead of silicone around the top of the sock holder. This section should be watertight, so make sure to fill in any gaps and smooth out the bead. Be careful not to get any silicone inside the lip where the sock fits. Any silicone on that lip will keep the sock from laying flush and will allow more water to bypass the socks. If your kit has a refugium section, it should be installed next. The procedure is the same for the first baffle. The final section is the adjustable skimmer and bubble trap. Typically, the best way to find the location for this section is to work backwards from the return pump section. Determine the amount of space needed to accommodate your chosen return pump. Next, add the thickness of the aquarium panel, followed by 2.5 inches. This will give you the total distance you need to measure from the side of the aquarium to determine the placement of the baffle. In our demonstration sump, we determined that we needed 6.25 inches to properly house our return pumps. Then we measured that our tank was approximately 1/4 inch thick glass. We then added 2.5 inches to come up with a total distance of 9 inches. As before, using a straight edge, draw lines around the outside of the tank. Using the baffle as a guide, mark the tank where the bottom of the notches for the braces are. It is important to ensure that the silicone does not interfere with the clear plate. The best way to keep that area clean is to remove the clear plate and apply a strip of blue masking tape just beyond the edge of where the clear plate goes. You only want to run silicone to the bottom of that notch at this point. Otherwise, it will interfere with the installation of the braces in the next step. Next, bring the panel in from the left-hand side of the silicone. Push the panel into the silicone so that it is only touching the right-hand side of the panel. You want the left side of the panel to remain silicone-free at this point. Using the supplied right angles, place them along the bottom and sides of the tank to ensure the panel is perfectly vertical and perpendicular to the front and rear panels. Using a finger or caulking tool, smooth out the silicone around the edge of the panel. Then readjust the panel using the jigs to double check that it is still straight. Before the silicone has a chance to cure, remove the 2 pieces of tape you applied earlier. Allow the panel to set in place and the silicone to cure at least 10 hours. Using the bottom tray as a guide, mark about 1 inch above it on both the front and rear panels of the tank. You want this area to be clear of silicone so that the plate will lay flat against the tray. With that in the location of where the tray will be in your mind, run a bead of silicone along the bottom and slightly up the sides of the baffle and smooth it out. With the silicone still wet, immediately apply a generous amount to the 2 top braces and install them like previously. Run a bead of silicone above the mark and smooth out around the 2 braces. Place the bottom plate in the slots along the bottom of the baffle. Install the final baffle in place, making sure that all the tabs line up and are fully seated. Run the final bead of silicone along the back side of the panel, smooth, and leave to cure. That's it, you've finished installing your baffle kit. The silicone will be secure enough to move the sump within 24 hours, but can take weeks before the silicone is completely cured. Depending on the climate and the thickness of the silicone, the dry time can be quite long. A general rule we like to use is that if you can stick your nose up to the silicone and still detect an odor, it hasn't fully cured. We all know how anxious everyone is to get their new systems up and running, but patience is your friend and your livestock will thank you. If you have any further comments or questions, don't hesitate to shoot us an email.